Hello, Gonchers. I'm Lauren Shippen, a professional writer who once saw Goncharov on the big screen at an LA film festival.
What a privilege.
Yeah.
What a privilege
Feel really
to
lucky.
see it on the big screen, Lauren. I'm Cherokee McAnelly, head of entertainment at Tumblr, who has watched Goncharov more than 10 times, unfortunately, never on the big screen. Adding that to the bucket list.
Absolutely. You got to do it. What you're such a Gonch head. And this is Dashboard Diaries, a podcast for you, the folks who are in this internet bunker with us. We talk about what's going on our favorite hell site, get into what we like to call Tumblr, do fandom deep dives, and share the times when we've gone feral over a new ship. And today, we are having a hefty 50th anniversary conversation about Goncharov. That's right. It's been 50 years since Goncharov came out in 1973, which it definitely really did. And we've got some special guests.
Should be a national holiday.
Yeah, it really should be. So we're just going to go dive right into our main topic. So here is that Goncharov celebration. All right, so we have very special guests to talk about Goncharov. With us, we have Perry Carpenter and Mason Amadeus. Perry and Mason run an amazing podcast called Digital Folklore. Would you guys want to tell us a little bit about what Digital Folklore is?
Yeah, we can give it a shot. So Digital Folklore is a show that is all about our online lives and the way that we express ourselves, and we look at things through the lens of academic folklore. So we try to ask very sociological type questions, but at the same time make it not too heady and too droll. So we've wrapped things in a fictional universe, and there's very weird offbeat stuff that tends to happen. Mason has a raccoon in the show. It's a fun feast.
It's a little bit like if Scooby-Doo had a documentary shoehorn into it. So it's kind of cartoonish, but with real information. So it's kind of a fun little playground to explore that. To teach and to learn about like what folklore is, because it's something that is not widely understood, but is crucially important.
Yeah.
So to kick us off, we are talking about Goncharov today, which is a movie that does not exist. And so I thought it would be fun to do a little quiz. I'm going to give you 4 movie titles. One of them is real, and I need you 3 to pick the real movie.
Oh, gosh.
So the first one's a little bit of a gimme because we're talking about it, right? Goncharov from the 1970s, directed by Martin Scorsese. Shazam from the 90s, starring Sinbad. Kazam from the 90s, starring Shaquille O'Neal. Interview with a Vampire from the 90s, based off the book of the same name. Which of these is a real movie?
I hate to say this, but I think it was Shazam, right? Because there was a whole Mandela effect about Kazam starring Shaquille O'Neal, and that was a whole thing on the internet that I feel like I remember seeing. And I think it was a Sinbad movie, right?
Cherokee, Perry, what do you guys think?
Well, my thought was going to be Kazam, so now I feel like I have been Mandela affected.
No, for me, the real one was Shazam, because I think I was old enough to see it when it first came out. But I could be remembering wrong. That's how Mandela effect works, right? Yeah.
We've got 2 votes for Shazam and 1 vote for Kazam. Is that where we're at?
Which one had Sinbad?
Shazam had Sinbad.
The one with Sinbad is the real one. The one with Shaq is the fake Mandela effect one, or just the alternate universe one.
So the real movie in this is Kazam, starring Shaquille O'Neal.
No.
Oh, no.
No.
Hey,
no.
Look at that.
No.
Sinbad and Shazam there is, of course, now a movie called Shazam starring Zachary Levi that's in the DC universe.
Right.
And the Interview with a Vampire was a little bit of a tricky one because this was a Mandela effect that happened to me earlier this year when I started watching the TV show. I've always remembered it as Interview with a Vampire. It's Interview with the Vampire, which I didn't know. But you all seem to understand that was incorrect.
Yeah.
But yeah, Kazam is a real movie. Shazam is not. But a lot of people do remember seeing a movie with Sinbad. But it doesn't exist.
I got double Mandela.
You got double Mandela.
Sorry.
Would you guys want to quickly describe what the Mandela effect is? Because I have to think that's something you encounter all the time in digital folklore.
Go for it, Mason.
That was something that it threw me for a loop when I first heard about it. It was the... Oh, gosh. It's called the Mandela effect because a lot of people remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison, I think, in the 80s. I might have that wrong, but Nelson Mandela did not. So, but a lot of this, it's the communal mass misremembering of things. So like the one that I related to the most was the Bernstein Bears, is actually the Berenstain Bears. And then people have been on the hunt for like, there's a popular picture of an old video cassette of the Berenstain Bears that was spelled that way. And that picture went viral as proof that we have shifted to an alternate universe,
Right.
in which this is now true.
Yes. Yeah. The Berenstain thing really got me too. That threw me
Yeah.
for a loop. I still don't really believe it.
Well, I still don't know which is which. It can every time I forget. I'm in too deep.
We are all occupying slightly different universes.
Yeah.
I mean, you do get into a lot of the internet culture stuff, and what one of the prevailing theories is for a lot of the Mandela effects is that with the Large Hadron Super Collider from which one is that?
CERN.
It's the one in Sweden. Yeah, CERN. The last time they did that, they actually inflicted a multiverse on everybody.
You know what? I believe it. And I like to think that there's a multiverse somewhere where I can actually watch Goncharov. It's a real movie that exists.
Right?
Oh, there are multiple multiverses, I think, with Goncharov. There's the Goncharov like cartoon in one, musical in another, TV show in the next.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
But then what movie from our universe would they have made up in the Goncharov universe? Would like...
Titanic.
Oh, it'd have to be Titanic. I was going to say The
he was great.
Matrix because it would just be ironic.
Yeah.
That'd be very trippy. We should probably talk about what Goncharov is and how exactly it began. So
Yes.
Goncharov is a movie by Martin Scorsese from the 1970s about the mob. It's the greatest mob movie ever made, and it doesn't exist. It is a essentially mass hallucination, but like a participatory hallucination that Tumblr had last fall that grew out of a post from a few years prior.
Yeah,
actually.
2020.
Yeah, of these boots that are knockoff boots that have a fake sort of movie poster on the tongue of the boot, and it says Martin Scorsese presents Goncharov, and then a bunch of other information. And this post floated around the internet for a couple of years. There's actually a Reddit post about it as well, and everybody's sort of speculating on like what it was, trying to say, what it was actually trying to be. Most people agree that the real film I was trying to reference was Gomorrah from 2008. But then for some reason, last fall, Tumblr decided to pretend that this was a real movie and make it so. Perry Mason, what was like the first thing that you saw about Goncharov? Were you aware of this before we started to talk about it?
I was not. You were the first person I
Yeah.
heard about it from, and I have no idea how I missed it because I love this so much.
Yeah. Well, I think so we had missed it, but in fairness, it's really only been around a short amount of time. So
Yeah.
the first real inflection point was in November of 2022, and as we sit here recording this in early April, this thing blew up like crazy within weeks, and there were several other things competing for people's attention at the time. Of course, holiday season, but then also a lot of noise over on Twitter because of somebody taking that over and kind of forcing it downhill a lot, which I also think contributed to some of the stuff that was going on Tumblr, because you had this massive influx of new users trying to abandon ship from Twitter as well.
Yeah.
And looking for something to have fun with.
I have a timeline question.
Mm-hmm.
You said the first appearance, was it just the picture of the boots in 2020 and the actual,
Yeah.
the lore did not form until 2022?
Correct.
Okay.
The original poster actually no longer exists, or the original post doesn't, but it was from a Tumblr user called Zudi Coon. And then it got tossed around Tumblr a little bit. Like, I remember seeing it actually like 18 months ago on my own Tumblr dash. And because somebody commented like, this loser hasn't even seen Goncharov, and it was just like a joke. And then for whatever reason, in November of 2022, I think the first post that really blew up was a movie poster that somebody made of a Goncharov movie poster. And then Cherokee, I mean, you got to see behind the scenes this thing take flight. What happened?
Yeah, so that movie poster, which cast the film and everything, essentially created the framework in which everyone could kind of play with Goncharov, right? So I think that was really the catalyst. And I'm looking right now at our last 6 months metrics, and the metrics for Goncharov, it is a like line straight up in the air on the line graph. overnight, genuinely overnight, on the 21st of November, it went from, barely just a few searches for Goncharov, like there were like a few thousand starting on the 20th, and on the 21st there were over 133,000 searches alone, 12,000 posts made, 212,000 reblogs. And this is just on that one day. So it really was just like a powder keg. It was just like from 0 to 100, 0 to a million, genuinely overnight. And that engagement kind of continued for about a week on like a high level. And then it kind of slowed down around like mid to late December. But it was just such a huge like moment that it happened. And I feel like I logged on one morning and was like, what?
Sorry, I've got a question on some of the stats. When you're doing those analytics, do you have the ability to understand like what population that's coming from, to see if there's some kind of effect due to age group or region or anything else, personal interest? That'd be really interesting to drill down into.
Oh, it's not, unfortunately, something that at least I, with my very basic statistics knowledge, know how to access.
What would you say, Cherokee, is likely the Tumblr user-based demographics? Like, is that something that...
Yes, I can share that with you. Tumblr is 42% Gen Z, 38% millennial, and 20% Gen X and boomer. We are like gender split is 56% female, 44% male, or identifying as. And our biggest user base is definitely in the US. And one kind of interesting thing that we do track is duplication across platforms. So, for example, 74% of people who are on Tumblr are not on Snapchat. 51% for TikTok, 48% for Twitter. So Tumblr really is for those who are really active on Tumblr, it's their primary social platform.
Half of Tumblr users do not use TikTok?
Correct.
That's buck wild to me, especially given the breakdown of almost half being Gen Z.
Mm-hmm. I do think there was a big exodus from other social platforms to Tumblr. I feel like this is not a correct characterization, but I always call Tumblr the antisocial social platform because you're so much like you're engaging about your passions with people you may not know. It's kind of where you can kind of go to dive in and geek out. And, just really like be unapologetically yourself. Often people are anonymous on there. And I do think that kind of drove a lot, just like we see a lot of Gen Z, just like there's a movement for flip phones because people were saying, people are starting to use their socials and other things just on their computers and keeping their phones to like reduce their screen time. And so I do think it was very much like a rejection of like the social aspect of social media, even though Tumblr obviously is a very social platform, but in a completely different way, I feel, than others. I never see it as a competitor of other platforms because I think it's so different and like unique. It's just a completely different beast.
It's very artist friendly.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a divergence, but I'm super curious because I did not know that there was any sort of a push of people moving away from smartphones as their primary way of interacting with social media and back to computers.
Yeah.
That breaks my brain a little bit because I use my computer primarily for them. But I feel like I feel old for doing that. So you're telling me the kids are doing that now and it's cool again.
It's cool to have a flip phone.
From what I have heard, yes. And I will say I have seen more and more flip phones when I'm just out and about, kind of in the world.
Wild.
With like the younger age groups. Yeah. I feel like I sound very hello, fellow kids right now saying this. Right? But it's true. Like I do. Yeah, I have like there has been a distinct kind of shift away from smartphones. And honestly, I saw that and I was like, that sounds great. I would love to not be glued to my phone all the time. Yeah.
I mean, Tumblr too, the majority of users are desktop users, right? I mean, I know it's like split kind of 50-50, but I use Tumblr primarily on the desktop.
It's actually about 80% in the app.
Oh, it is? Oh, yeah. Okay. So I'm
really,
just
really
completely
app
wrong.
Yeah. But which is interesting, Lauren, because I do feel like a lot of super users who are reblogging
Super
dozens
user.
of things or hundreds of things do prefer the desktop experience. I definitely prefer using it on desktop just because like bigger screen, I can look at like if I want to search a tag, I see a grid of the tags versus just one at a time. So it's just, you can see more content at once. I prefer the desktop experience also to see the themes that people pick out and have fun with. I just love that side of Tumblr. Yeah.
You should absolutely create a flip phone app, though, just to see what consumption is like on that form factor.
We used to have text to post. You could text a number, what you wanted your post to say, and it would post on your Tumblr. I think we sunsetted that a few years ago. Yeah.
There's no takebacks. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
So I'll tell you a quick story because I'm, in an upper demographic. I just turned 50 last year, probably about the time Goncharov was going hot on Tumblr. And so I had used Tumblr a few years ago and it didn't click with me at the time, but my kids are huge Tumblr users. And I was like, okay, what's going on with Tumblr? Mm-hmm. And my son said, this is where all these, very niche groups of people hang out. He's both him and I are on the autism spectrum. So he said there's a whole bunch of neurodivergence there. Mm-hmm. They have a whole bunch of friends that are spread across several different communities, and those communities are represented there as well. And then he said, "Let me send you some of the best posts that I've seen." And he sent this post about somebody that had a dream that they were working at a delicatessen selling clown meat, and just all the interaction about.
I think I've seen that post.
What is clown meat? Is it human? Is it not human? And what are the laws and the ethics surrounding this? And just the way everybody was piling onto this, creating this really interesting, rich discussion about clown meat. And I thought that was fantastic.
Look, only on Tumblr.
I really do think that and just like Goncharov in general is a thing that could only happen on Tumblr because of who the user base is and what they like to do and the way that they behave. And I think one of the things I really loved about Goncharov is it leaned into one of my favorite things about Tumblr, which actually we talked about on our last episode, which is that Tumblr users will make fan art for literally anything. Like there will be just a nonsense text post and then there will be fan art for it all of a sudden. And so obviously like Goncharov was a huge wealth of just absolutely stunning fan art. But what was amazing, and here I will drop this this document in the chat here, is that somebody compiled a document of all of the Goncharov lore, the script excerpts, the scoring that people made, the casting.
I pulled the same
costuming.
document. That master doc is amazing.
It's incredible.
The level of detail that's in that is crazy.
Can I just bring something up? That's the first thing I saw. Is the act of adding lore to the Goncharov story referred to as gonching?
Is it referred to as gonching?
Well, the very first line says there's a Discord server now for gonching.
I think gonching, I've seen gonching used more generally to just mean like participating in the Goncharov fandom, right? So like, I think that, if you are just like playing along with the joke, I think you are gonching rather. You don't necessarily have to be adding to the lore. And I also don't know, I think that there's so much out there on Tumblr that's not in this document, that's probably not in the Discord, but that is on Tumblr of people adding to the lore, people, putting their headcanons forward, which in this case, a headcanon could easily become canon because there is no real canon. And so it does become this like sort of democratic system of like, okay, well, what posts are getting big enough that the people who are making these documents are hanging out and in these Discords are sort of making them official Goncharov lore.
Well, I mean, the cool thing about, a master doc like that and some of the other posts that have been out there, some of the other archival ways of managing this is that they are literally managing the canon in a lot of ways of saying, no, you can't, or at least you shouldn't try to create something that is directly competing with or conflicting with this other set of, quote unquote facts that we've established or scene structures that we've established or casting or catchphrases or anything else. I think it's fascinating to see the group agreement with that as well.
Yeah. I feel like it's really interesting just given the fan casting power of Tumblr as well. I mean, I always think about how many movies and shows have been fan cast on Tumblr before they were cast elsewhere, and they were completely accurate. Most recently, Ben Barnes from Shadow and Bone as the Darkling, that was a Tumblr fan cast that, became reality. And so I do think Tumblr somehow has this kind of hive mind where everyone just like agrees on the vibe or something. Because it really did feel like, this is the cast and this is the plot. And obviously there's a big deal with clocks like throughout as symbolism. Like, duh.
Tumblr is yes and personified, right?
And
I think
that's it.
One of the things that I've loved too is I've seen some. I'll have to make sure to reblog this next time I see one of these posts. But I've seen posts, and certainly back in November when there was lots of Gonching going on, that are like, modern AU of Goncharov, and it's people like doing like posts about a fan AU of canon that fans made. Like it's this, and there's like over 500 fics in the Goncharov tag on AO3, the largest fan fiction website. So it's like, yes-anding just all the way down.
Well, and I think you hit on something there, though, when you talk about AO3 is that the reason that something like this can take off so well on Tumblr is you do have a fantastic collection of creative people, creative writers, artists, people who can put these things together. And it's an outlet for them. So it's not just trying to do something for the sake of doing it, something for the creative process and the community that they're wanting to get involved in. And it would come out some other way if it didn't go into Goncharov.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and I feel like it's built with collaboration in mind. It's so easy for people to kind of pile on a post.
And we could talk about that in a second too, because that fits into what makes something viral is that participation piece. And there's been a lot of studies on that.
Well, I was going to ask, in terms of things like Goncharov, it's like a fake Mandela effect, right? Because everybody sort of knows that it's fake, and it's this viral meme, but it's more than a meme. Are there, in your digital folklore studies, are there things like this that you have come across before? And if there are there sort of any similarities across these different memes or viral things that sort of tell us about why people do stuff like this and how it happens?
Yeah, I think so. I'll let Mason chime in on this because I know that he probably has some thoughts. But, one of the really interesting things about studying folklore has been the way that we see things used and misused. And so one of the things, and as I was looking through a lot of the Tumblr comments on Goncharov, is that there was kind of an understanding that this is also an experiment in disinformation. To kind of see what can be created and what some people might believe is real. And so as you did have groups of people that were trying to make official Wikipedia entries or edit Martin Scorsese's page to include it. And it was like 7 or 8 times. And Wikipedia was like, please keep the purity of, what is fact, and what is not. And so you had people within the Tumblr community saying, we want to play by the rules. We're trying to show what disinformation can look like, but we don't want to pollute legitimate sites because we do want there to be objective truth out in the world. And I think that, when you look at 2015, 2016 on, we've seen the devastating effect that real disinformation can bring. And I think when you look at the population of Tumblr, you're seeing people who have really been grappling with that for a good chunk of their lives. It's not just the past few years for them. It's a big percentage of the life that they've lived. And they're seeing that and they're saying, how do we grapple with that? And something like Goncharov is one interesting expression of it. And as I was looking through it, seeing kind of, the way that people were trying to police that and say, please stop editing real Wikipedia. Please stop trying to edit IMDb, and so on. But then they did get some head nods. There's a TV tropes page for it. There's several other expressions. There's quote unquote official soundtracks and sheet music and all of these other fun expressions that if somebody is not of the mind of if somebody doesn't dig a little bit deeper, they may actually think that this is a real movie. Like one of the things that we studied, which was Slender Man.
Yeah.
That is an interesting kind of alignment.
And Slender Man led, to real life harm, which is happens a lot with disinformation, as you alluded to.
Yeah. I mean, Mason, what were some of the artifacts that were out there for Slender Man?
Yeah. My first thought was that there are definitely parallels to Slender Man, because that was also, a lighthearted thing at the start. Horror themed, but it was just everyone contributing little bits.
Started in a comedy form.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And with Slender Man, there was like the German woodcuts, the faked German woodcuts, and like old paintings and tapestries and people making that sort of evidence. But it was, all of the examples I'm thinking of are more decentralized in a way, whereas like most of this happened on Tumblr. There was a central platform where everyone was working on this, whereas Slender Man started on a comedy forum, kind of gained popularity there, and then spread to other places of the internet that then added more to it. Like the YouTube series Marble Hornets did a significant amount of lore and world building, which influenced other people creating in the space. And so it spread really far off the initial platform really quickly. And in a way, memes are also like an example of this, in the sense of they gain so much social metadata as they're passed around and new layers of meaning are added to them. But that again is so decentralized. I think I don't know what it is about Tumblr specifically that makes it such a magical little ground for growing this kind of thing. But because it all happened there and is able to have like someone posts like, I'm making a Google Doc and we're going to add things to it. And it's everything being available in the same space and worked on by this community. And it seems largely like it's stayed there. I don't know for sure, but it's not like people on Twitter are now
spilled over into Twitter a little bit, and people on Twitter didn't know what to do with it. So some people thought it was fun, and other people were like, "What the heck, dude? This is kind of lame. I don't know what's going on here." But one of the interesting things, kind of thinking about this, kind of grappling with what truth is and thinking about disinformation, is in folklore there is the concept of folklore, which is where people will create non-genuine folklore, which is exactly what folklore sounds like. But it's usually there's a purpose behind that. That purpose is usually either creative, for the sake of writing a book, and I'm going to create an alternative version of Little Red Riding Hood, or my own version of anything out there, or even something whole cloth, but then say this originated from some kind of German mythology when it never did. But then the darker way of doing that is to kind of other people, and to say that they're trying to reflect some kind of dark prejudice or something like that in whatever lore they create. And folklorists and anthropologists really are struggling with that, I think, in the age that we're in right now, because as we saw with Goncharov and we saw with Slender Man and so on, it's so easy now to pollute the real record of things.
Yeah.
I mean, and so you can potentially go in, and in something that's not policed well, you could potentially go in and edit a real Wikipedia page or something else in an older post and make it look like this thing exists, or that there's evidence of something that reflects a much darker purpose than the fun-loving, stuff that we see with Goncharov.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, first off, they have now locked Scorsese's Wikipedia page.
Fair.
Jeez.
But it also makes me think of when you were talking about going in and kind of replacing something and making it something new. It makes me think of back in the early Tumblr days when you could edit someone else's post if you reblocked it and switch out the image.
Yes.
And so there were a bunch of kind of Tumblr heritage posts that were getting cycled around. I think one was like Jensen Ackles like in like a gym uniform or something, and people kept like switching out the photo but changed it, and so people had no idea where this post started, which was the original, and there were just dozens of iterations, if not thousands, just across Tumblr.
And that's something that really can only exist on Tumblr, right? Because I think that Tumblr used to have this incredibly unique quality in which you could edit somebody's original post in the reblog, which is wild, and that's not a thing anymore. But what is a thing still is that if I make a post and it gets reblogged a bunch, and then I edit the original post, that those edits don't show up in the reblog, right? And so that's a thing too, where people will make jokes with, posting a particular text or particular image. They'll let it get reblogged a bunch, and then they will change the original post, and eventually someone will say, like, click through to the original, and there will be like a fun little like Rickroll or surprise or punchline. And that's not something that any other platform has, because I mean most platforms, like Twitter, I know, has introduced an edit button for some people, but I think that then if the retweets, I mean, who knows what's going on Twitter? I'm not going to pretend to understand how the infrastructure of that place works anymore, but it is a unique facet of Tumblr for sure.
Well, Twitter's been dealing with tons of iterations of like, how do we deal with the fact that people do play with truth on a massive scale for much darker purposes, I think, on a platform like Twitter or Facebook than on Tumblr. Because Twitter or Facebook, it's not really about creativity. It's about making a point or trying to deceive somebody for a very dark purpose. I remember when Musk said, "Hey, everybody can be Twitter blue now if you just pay $8 or whatever," not really believing that people would do bad things with that. And then of course, right when he made that a thing, everybody started creating these fake accounts that looked like verified accounts and causing stocks to tumble, people's reputations to be damaged and so on. It's like, oh, okay, I guess that may be a bad idea. People aren't just fun-loving on the internet.
Yeah, and I think the disinformation aspect, I hadn't really thought about that in relation to Goncharov, because I think in my mind, like, Goncharov is such a meme. It's a mass joke, but you're right in that it sort of fits into the same modes as a lot of disinformation. And this is a little bit of a tangent. I won't linger in it for too long, because it's, disinformation gets depressing very quickly. But I subscribe to a lot of newsletters and follow a lot of journalists who have been working in dis and misinformation for the last couple of years. It's sort of like a special interest of mine. And it's been really interesting to see over the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months, a lot of those journalists who have been absolutely mired in this particular topic for years and years and years are not using the terms disinformation and misinformation anymore, because some of them have kind of come to the conclusion of, like, there's one newsletter that I read called Control Alt Right Delete, which I think is a great newsletter title.
That's a phenomenal title.
Yeah. And that writer talked about this back in, I think, December, about how when we're dealing with these darker aspects of disinformation, especially as it pertains to, extremists in this country, it's not about misinformation or what's true anymore. It's about a completely separate constructed reality that people have chosen to live in. And that's where disinformation as a term kind of meets its limit, because it doesn't matter to them that it's not true, because it fits into their constructed reality. And I think that Goncharov is sort of like a very lighthearted version of that, right? Like, it's just a version of reality that we are collectively creating, in which this movie exists. And, it doesn't matter what's true about it, because the purpose of the meme is that it's an alternate version of reality.
What I think is so fascinating about that particularly, though, is that nobody who's engaging in this is thinking of it like that, No one in there is thinking yes, I am creating an alternate version of reality, engaging in these folkloric practices. It's just like, oh, this is fun and creative. And like how naturally we do that as humans, of just like, oh, this is fun. Let me just pile in and join in. It's super cool to me. And I'm really curious about what it is about Tumblr, because it's like you were talking about with the fan casting and everything else. It really is a very particular ground for this kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think a big aspect of it is that Tumblr is not the home to, but a home of fanfic, fan art, headcanons, creating, your own world within the parameters of the media that you consume and that you love. So Goncharov was just a new, exciting challenge or journey or like opportunity here, because fanfic could become fan fact in the context of Goncharov, which I think was very exciting for our user base, who, this was kind of primed for them to dig their teeth into, or to dig their claws into, whatever the term is that I'm looking for. Mandela effect. Let's call it that.
Well, and I think that I do think that there is something unique about Tumblr's infrastructure and like the way that actually Tumblr functions practically as a platform. And Mason, earlier when you were talking about sort of the decentralized memes, I'm really curious to hear what you think about how the actual like user interface of a platform can affect something and keep it there or, you know, take it elsewhere. Because I think another thing with Tumblr, and I think Tumblr now is very much, yes, the home of fandom on the internet. Like, sure, there's fandom on TikTok and on Twitter, but like Tumblr has just sort of always been that. But I think it became that because of the way in which reblogs work, the way that the dashboard works, the way that you can have a Tumblr account and have a bunch of sub-blogs that you can post to. So you can have your Marvel sub-blog, you can have your DC Comics so that they don't overlap, because some people really like to keep their fandom blogs very specific. Whereas if you want to do that on Twitter, you would have to create separate accounts for each new Twitter profile. And when it comes to something like Slender Man, like why does that thrive outside of a particular platform?
That's a good question. And it brushes up against something that I was thinking. Like Tumblr supports very well natively all sorts of media that you can include in a post. Like even audio post, which is not something you really see anywhere else. But you know, you can do photos and videos and quotes and reblogs and things like that, all in ways that are presented very well. Whereas like video on Twitter is like a compromise from a user element standpoint because it was added in later and it doesn't super fit with the design. You know, and a lot of platforms are
or text on Instagram or text on TikTok. You know, there's no good mixed mode experience in a lot of these things. I mean, Facebook is pretty close, but Facebook has its own demographic issues and legacy baggage.
Yeah,
but you know, I think when you look at platforms, you do have to think about how do I want to interact on platform X, and it has to be tailored to that. I think Tumblr is very much it caters towards somebody that needs to express themselves. Period. Yeah, and it's going to let them do that. Versus like TikTok, where you do have to be fairly comfortable with doing something on video, but TikTok itself is also it is a folklore factory in a lot of ways because it allows you to create something and then it can let somebody else become part of the conversation by stitching or duoing or something like that. So you can get this, you know, cat making a weird noise and then somebody else can go in and put guitar behind that. And then somebody else could go, oh, I hear a drum part in my head. Let me put that. And then before you know it, you have this, you know, nice, really rockin' symphony of a cat doing its thing. And it's just gone around. It's gone through several different iterations. And I think Tumblr does that, but in a much more multi-mode type of way. So you can get all these different creative vibes. You know, somebody's a great writer, somebody's a great manipulator of imagery, somebody else is, you know, going to create music and so on, and it just comes together in a very full way.
Yeah, and I like how on Tumblr, like as you said, like you can kind of build posts exactly how you want to see them, and then you can also add on to people's posts in kind of whatever media you want as well. You can reblog and add a poll or a photo or a GIF or whatever it is. And so I think you kind of see like the rings of a tree, you know, like when you look at a post, you kind of see like the journey that it's taken across all these people's blogs, especially when it's one of those posts that becomes, you know, like a reblog tree where people are just adding, or a reblog chain where people are just adding on their own kind of take. I think it was the Mr. Sandman, Man Me a Sand, like that collaborative kind of.
Yeah.
So like he made up an entire song. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Nice.
Thank you for re-unlocking that in my brain. We interviewed Dr. Vivian Asimos for our episode on Slender Man, and one of the things we talked to her about was how the internet has changed folklore. And one of the things she mentioned that stuck with me is how basically the platforms it's created on end up shaping it and seeing how it takes form. Yeah. And so it kind of makes sense to think of this one. This is largely text, and it comes from Tumblr, which home of text posts and fanfics, but also has the graphic design element and things like that. But
I think you mentioned fan fiction. I think that is the heart of this. Is you have a lot of people that are, you know, their heart is in story and their heart is in creating, you know, big things, and they had this, you know, chance to come together collectively and do that. The other thing going back to folks that we interviewed on the Slender Man side, we had that introduction of the concept of the woozle effect, which is it comes from a Winnie the Pooh story where Pooh and Piglet were following their own footsteps in circles, thinking that would lead them out of the woods, and it's become this term that's been used to describe where somebody's evidence of a thing is actually the fact that they did the thing. Somebody else did the same thing. And so you end up with, circular footnotes and things or references that the reason that this thing is true is because there's this other thing is true that actually points back to the first thing. And so it becomes really hard to deconstruct. And I think there are elements of that in Goncharov as well. There's been so much ancillary creation around that somebody could point to the reality of it by finding one of these, third, fourth, fifth generation pieces of content that somebody created. The fact that there's a musical score for it.
Yeah.
That is a very interesting piece of evidence for a thing.
Yeah, the only thing about this film that doesn't exist is the film itself. Every other aspect of it has been completely fleshed out.
Well, and you even have Martin Scorsese in a text chain saying, I did that movie several years ago.
Yeah, which is incredible. And I've seen some people on Tumblr sort of joking about like what would happen if somebody ever actually made Goncharov. Like, would that ruin the joke?
They would
or would
get
it be
skewered.
The ultimate culmination? And I think the woozle effect is something that I was thinking about just in terms of how hard it can be to, find the starting point of all of these things, but also to know where to start when looking into these things. And I think Tumblr especially can be, intimidating to people sometimes in terms of jumping into it as a platform. I'm really curious for you too, when you are picking a topic, whether it's Slender Man or you want to learn about Goncharov, where do you start? Like, what's the first thing that you do? What are the places you go to, the modes you take to try and untangle this web?
We, at the moment, at least for season 1, have kind of gone with broader themes to explore. Like the Slender Man one was exploring a folkloric concept of ostension, which is when someone in real life acts out parts of a story or parts of a story come to fruition. And Slender Man was a good example, and so was the Momo phenomenon. And so then in the other one, we're exploring alternate reality games and like folk groups. So it's kind of, as to where that started, I think it just sort of comes from aggregating a couple of different like neat things we've heard about, and then following that trail a little bit deeper and seeing what that intersects with, and trying to find a point in between to take things on. I feel like that's true, because if I have to give like the perfect, complete, honest answer, I have like no idea. You know how whenever you set to start something, you have this idea, and then no matter what, the act of doing it makes it something totally different. That definitely happens a lot.
Yeah, I think we start with these broad ideas of something like, the mimetic nature of something might be a theme, and then we want to find 5 examples of that. And so Goncharov could be, mimetic in some ways. It's more than just a meme, but it is very mimetic in the way that it spread. Then we would get into topics like virility, and you might look at Goncharov versus like Bernie Sanders and mittens. What was the reason that potentially that one of these, actually both of those exploded, but what were the factors involved in that? Well, after with Goncharov, you've got kind of the implosion of Twitter. You've got just the natural group of people that like to hang out on Tumblr. There's probably 3 or 4 other factors that we could find that may have contributed to that. With Bernie Sanders, you have, as you look at several aspects of virility, you have, ordinary people. You have heightened emotion. You have something, people that are just looking for fun. You also have at the end of a very, very rough political season, and everybody needing to collectively exhale and laugh a little bit. And so you saw people, regardless of where they were on the political spectrum, agreeing this is a great image, and sharing that in so many different ways. And there's probably two reasons for this. One is because I found it in a book called Memes and Digital Culture, and it is from the Mandela effect of the Mandela version of Lauren. This is from somebody named Lauren Shippen. And the name sounds so close to yours, but in a weird alternate universe type of way.
Oh my God!
From the multiverse where Goncharov exists.
Yeah,
Exactly.
And in her book on memes, and this is a little bit, it's like 10 years old at this point that this book came out, but she wrote about a study from Jonah Berger and Katie Milkman, and they talked about the 5 Ps of what makes something go viral. And so, or actually the 6 Ps. And so one is positivity. So it's something that people can enjoy, can have fun in, they can celebrate. Another one is provoking high arousal emotions. And that's usually things like anger or joy, celebration. Another one is packaging, just the way that it looks, the way that it feels. Prestige of maybe being associated with somebody great like Martin Scorsese, or if we're to do it something this year with The Matrix, or not The Matrix, with John Wick 4 coming out, you might do something with Keanu Reeves. Positioning, and then the last one is participation. Can everybody pile on to this thing? And I think when you look at something like Goncharov or Bernie's Mittens, or a lot of these other things that have just gone crazy, it is because you see several of these things lining up in just the perfect way. And it was fun to kind of look through that lids of the way that certain academics have tried to measure the mimetic nature of something or the viral nature of something, and try to look at that and see whether these things match up or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because it sort of relates to a book that I'm reading right now called Because Internet, which is about the history of sort of internet language. And one of the things that she talks about in the chapter that I just read was specifically around the early memes, as we think of memes, right? So like lolcats and Doge and these various things, and sort of the impact font memes, and how in the beginning they were existing in a very specific community because of the amount of effort that it took to make them. And then when sort of meme maker websites came to fruition, all of a sudden they exploded. And I think that the ability to participate and the ease of participation is so important, and something that definitely lends itself to the Goncharov phenomenon, because yes, you can be a beautiful visual artist or an incredible writer and write script, pieces, or write music or whatever it is. But you can also just be a person with a Tumblr account who makes a post about a moment in Goncharov like you would talk about a moment in a movie. And because there's no sort of one true source, everybody's participation is equal. And I think that's really unique.
Yeah.
I love the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So much.
Absolutely.
And it would not be Dashboard Diaries if we didn't end the show with our Feels Corner. Cherokee, what is giving you feels this week?
The feels I'm getting this week are terrified, but it's still an emotion. It's still a feeling. I am watching Yellow Jackets season 2. I don't know if you watch this show, Lauren,
I do.
But oh my. Did you see the newest episode?
I haven't seen the newest one yet. I've only seen the first one of the season.
Oh my, Lauren. Oh my. So yeah, I love Yellow Jackets. I have watched the first season 2 or 3 times, I think. And I just love the mystery of it. It's so much fun. So yeah, really stoked about this season of Yellow Jackets and Succession.
Of course.
Succession, not Secession. Succession just came back. And as a Tom Gregg truther, I'm very excited.
Oh, the Disgusting Brothers.
My favorite duo back. What about you, Lauren? What has you in your feels?
It's going to be Star Trek Next Gen again. I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but my partner and I have been watching through the whole series. We're in season 5 now, and we just watched an episode last night called The Outcast that was made in 1992, and it's this beautiful trans allegory about the strictures of gender being a prison, and people being able to choose how they want to express their gender. It was made in 1992, and it's amazing. And so I really love seeing stuff from 30 years ago that is so heartfelt and so progressive. It makes me very, very hopeful. So that's been a highlight. And then earlier this same season was the very famous episode Darmok, which made me cry. So get emotional over old TV shows. That's my recommendation for this week.
Love to get emotional over old TV shows. So go back and watch Goncharov, old film,
Exactly.
not TV show, but still, it absolutely will put you in your feels.
It really will. And with that, I'm Lauren Shippen, and you can find me at theLaurenShippen.tumblr.com.
I am Cherokee McAnelly, and you can find me at Overshares, Overchers, pun very much intended, .tumblr.com. The pun very much intended is not a part of the URL, just flagging. This has been Dashboard Diaries, and
may your anons always be loving,
your dash always refresh,
your gifts always be loading,
and your ships always canon.
May the fix you're reading always be finished,
and the answers you seek always in the reblogs.
Thanks for scrolling with us.